We take a look at the no side on the con tonight. The Constitutional Convention is a lightning rod question for our general election coming up on November 4th. We, the people, must decide whether or not we would like a Constitutional Convention. And we've had advocates for the idea here on the broadcast recently, and now we have Dr. Pablo Rodriguez, who will tell us that not a good idea. And so I'm looking forward to his arguments. And certainly we'll schedule closer to the election a good hearty debate or two about the matter prior to your time when you really start to think about this stuff, which is getting closer. Just look at the calendar. Honor to have you aboard. Dan York, State of Mind. Let's go to the rundown and check on a couple of things. You know, I'm open to the idea of gender politics being constructive from time to time, but this certainly is not one of them. And then you got the Gina and Jack routine, which is a complete sham at the Board of Elections yesterday. I have to issue one of those, and I will during the middle of the rundown, because it syncs up to these conversations about the mayoral race in Providence and their constant chatter now, endorsements coming now from others on the city council and state rep delegation for the former mayor. And you can't forget about the doers. The doers are the people on the ground who sometimes have to say, hey, what about us? Okay, let's dig in and discuss these matters. Gender politics. Yeah. Look at this headline. This super PAC aiding Raimondo after ban ruled out. The ban on super PACs by the candidates themselves didn't come to fruition in the general election. It certainly was part of the deal in the primary, you know, where the three candidates, Democratic candidates anyway, decided that they wouldn't stand for the outside super PAC money, the Political Action Committee money. And if one advocate of super PAC First Amendment stuff impacted the other guys, then the one who benefited would take a fine and donate the money to charity from their campaign funds. Very convoluted. But it did clean up the race a little bit. Well, Alan Fung and Gina Raimondo aren't agreeing at all to that stuff. Okay, fine. So enter American Lead Her Ship. That's not a faux pas. Lead Her Ship. American Lead Her Ship. Okay? This is an organization that is allegedly about advancing the cause of women candidates for governor. Okay, we can get into that whole sad story, but this ad has nothing to do with it. This is what they're spending $125,000 on in this race.
What do we really know about Alan Fung, a career politician? As mayor, Fung raised taxes 3 times. An insider's insider. While Fung served on the city council and was supposed to be representing us, he was also being paid by insurance companies to lobby against homeowners. We need a governor to bring change to Rhode Island. Alan Fung, he's more of the same.
I'm Kate Coy-McCoy, Treasurer of American Leadership. I approve of and am responsible for the content of this ad.
Now, the candidates themselves have no relationship to the super PACs by law, right? But they certainly had a conversation about them during the primaries. Did you find anything that advances the issues of women in office or for a governor's seat in that ad? Did you? Did you? No, you didn't. Kate Coyne-McCoy, who ran for Congress years ago and is active in politics, in my humble opinion, ought to be ashamed of herself. To be bringing that kind of money, which does nothing but really supplement Gina Raimondo's attack ad budget, which is dwindling because she blew most of it in the primary, winning the primary. She's at a financial disadvantage to Alan Fung in this race because she spent most of her money, and Fung has our taxpayer matching funds. Look, Alan Fung gets his bell rung on this show more than often, no doubt. But when you've been victimized by a PAC, somebody ought to say it, and I'm saying it. And Gina Raimondo ought to stand up and tell that PAC publicly, not privately, publicly, to knock it off. The only moral of the story I get from this is that female politics can be as vacuous and morally corrupt as male politics. Congratulations. Next item. Speaking of ridiculous and morally vacuous, Gina and Jack are at it. Here's the headline in the Providence Journal from the Board of Elections ruling yesterday. So follow this. If the Democratic Party here in Rhode Island is going to give money to a federal candidate, they can't spend more than $94,000 doing it. If they spend to a statewide candidate, they can only spend $25,000. So a statewide candidate, $25,000, a federal candidate, $94,000. You get that, right? So what they have argued, and successfully argued at the Board of Election yesterday, is that the ad I'm going to show you is for Jack Reed, not Gina.
Rhode Island has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. Gina Raimondo's the only candidate for governor with business experience helping create jobs. The only one who solved big statewide problems. And the only one with a plan to work with Jack Reed to bring back manufacturing jobs.
I'm Gina Raimondo, and Rhode Island families are struggling. I hear you, and we're going to get Rhode Islanders back to work.
I'm Jack Reed, and I approve this message too.
What? You're going to tell me that's a Jack ad? No, that's a Gina ad, not a Jack ad. And the senator, who couldn't get beat if he was a part of an armed robbery, for heaven's sake, ought to just, not take part in this kind of financial shenanigans and maneuvering. I mean, this is unbelievable, the kind of outside the ropes and fine line legal stuff that happens to be going on. By the way, they wanted a private session with the Board of Elections, which they can have by law, as screwed up as that law is, and the Board of Elections, 4-0, privately supported that ad being a federal Jack Reed $94,000 threshold ad. Only in Rhode Island, man. I'm telling you, unbelievable. Issuing a correction. So yesterday I was telling you that Buddy Cianci ought to think twice, not about the $18,000 that he's generated from city employees for his campaign, but from the $1,000 from Richard Bakari, who is on trial in the federal court for a $50,000 bribery scheme alleged out of the North Providence Three Musketeers caper there, Three Stooges, really. Well, I relied on the Providence Journal's reporting on that, which was, in this particular case, a mistake. It's actually Richard Bakari Jr. that actually made that contribution, and so Buddy Cianci really doesn't have to worry about somebody who's on trial donating money to his campaign. And I say this with capital letters and a correction because what I hate about the newspaper industry is not that they make mistakes every once in a while and that as an attribution machine I might use their good work and then make a mistake because they did. That happens. But the correction on their story on the Providence Journal website was this small in little fine print. The newspaper industry has a soul search to do about the mistakes that they make when they are crucial. And they need to make a bigger deal other than little lines and little boxes on page 3 about something that you can't find in the original story if your life depended on it. When we make a mistake here, we put it in capital letters and we tell you, sorry, we screwed up. Next item, on the mayor's race, seems like it is, doesn't it? Here's the headline from the Journal's front page coverage of Moses Brown last night. It's funny, I responded to a request for credentials to cover a debate amongst the 3 mayoral candidates in Providence at Brown University next week. I'm thinking, oh, good, there'll be a debate. I didn't realize that they're having a debate just about every night. I don't know whether this is good pedestrian politics or just complete overkill. You're hearing about the same stuff over and over and over again, depending on who the constituency is. I guess it's good pedestrian politics, but I'll tell you, it certainly proves that running for an office like mayor is boots on the ground and fatiguing, no doubt. Now, speaking of the mayor's race, Buddy Cianci comes up with endorsements today. Headline: City Council now split on Elorza and Cianci because Cianci is added to his endorsement crowd. A lot of the East Siders and other folks on the council have been endorsing Jorge Elorza. What was interesting, in Silver Lake, up on the hill in the park, they had this big gathering of reps, former and current, councilors, former and current, and Kevin Jackson, who is the councilor and co-chair, spit this out to introduce the event, and our radio microphones at WPRO caught it.
Today we're gathered here to show the support of elected officials, past elected officials, ward committee chairs and ward committee people, and the citizens of Providence to bring back Mayor Cianci back to his rightful place in City Hall on the 2nd floor.
That is the most perverse thing I have heard in a long time. Buddy Cianci's rightful place in City Hall, like him or not, vote for him or not, no candidate for office nor elected official has a rightful place. They're there to work, lead, serve, be accountable, and responsible. This is not royalty, and that's a disgusting remark, in my humble judgment. And finally, this headline when it comes to the people you got to remember. Headline about LaGuardia Airport, and here's the latest on the Ebola challenge.
As health officials prepare to begin screening passengers from West Africa arriving at 5 major U.S. airports, dozens of airline cabin cleaners walked off the job at New York's LaGuardia Airport today because of Ebola fears. 2 American Ebola patients are still being treated in the U.S. TV cameraman Ashoka Mukpo received a blood transfusion yesterday from Dr. Kent Brantley, who beat Ebola last month. And officials at Emory Hospital in Atlanta confirm they are still treating an unidentified Ebola patient who arrived 1 month ago today.
Look, 94% capture in the major airports for traffic from West Africa. That leaves 6%. Conversations about travel restrictions are slowly getting there. But the people who've got to clean the airplanes, making a little noise at LaGuardia today, good for them. You know what? Sometimes we forget about the little people, the doers in the middle of big messes like this. Con. No, they say. No, they will. Question 3 is coming up on your ballot, and I don't want you going into the ballot place going, I know my viewers would never do that. Here's the headline here. This group says no. And interestingly enough, my guest, who you'll meet in just a second, tweeted out momentarily ago that he's going to convince me that it ought to be no. Here's the ad that's trying to convince you.
Our next item up for bid, the Rhode Island State Constitution, which can be bought for short money through a constitutional convention.
Across the country, wealthy out-of-state special interests have spent hundreds of millions of dollars influencing local elections.
$1 million, gentlemen in the front.
And so this is a YouTube ad. I'm sure it will reflect some of the on-air advertising that this group will be doing as well. It's rather lengthy and it just kind of repeats itself. But Dr. Rodriguez, it's nice to have you.
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining me. I've been longing for a no on question 3 advocate and came up with a blue chipper here. So that's good. I appreciate you coming in. I hope that we're not going to cover everything today, but I hope you'll sit with your friends Phil West and Gary Sass and the like and have a conversation in longer form prior to the election about this thing. Because
sure,
it'd be good to see you guys exchange ideas. But they have both been on the program regarding this. And before we get into what they've had to say, tell me what you have to say from a zero base as to why question 3 is a no-no.
Question 3 is a no-no because when you open the rule book of democracy, and that's what a constitutional convention is, you provide an opportunity for wealthy special interests from here, from the state and from out of the state, to introduce very divisive issues that they cannot drive through the General Assembly. And when this happens in the context of an election for delegates where the electorate does not participate. Last time it was only 18% of the electorate voted for delegates. Then you add to that the influence of money.
Whose fault is that, though?
It's the electorate. It's the electorate. But unfortunately, that's the electorate that we have. And it's the reality of what a constitutional convention is. You can have all sorts of hopeful wishes of how government should work. But in reality, it is up to the electorate to really get rid of the legislators that are not doing their job, supposedly, and not use a constitutional convention as a magic fix that is going to all of a sudden fix all of state government. It will not do so.
Well, in a one-party sided legislature, the likes of which we have, it doesn't seem to me that we're going to have any chance to answer some core questions. And I know what you're concerned about. And Phil West, formerly of Common Cause, and just wrote a great book about his reform process or progress or 20 years worth of experience, was on the show a couple of nights ago and said this about Pablo's worries.
Pablo is a friend.
Yeah.
And we've had some good conversations.
Well,
about
their
this.
argument is that there's special interest infiltration into a convention that's going to take away personal rights. And I know Gary the other night was saying, you know what, we'll waive that.
We will stand shoulder to shoulder with them and oppose any of those. They were distractions in the 1986 convention. I think they'd have less chance of success today. The anti-abortion amendment in '86 went down by a 2-to-1 vote, the worst of any of them. Okay. So I think it's not likely that today you'd be more likely to get an anti-abortion amendment, but
Right.
I think that we need to understand their fear.
You were an original member in 1986, or that was one of your original experiences, wasn't it?
That is correct. I came to the state in 1985.
I understand why you, as a pro-choice advocate, as strong as you are on that you'd be worried about that. And the gender equity issues with marriage and the like, I'm sure, are something you're concerned about. But most of the voices for this con are ready to say, you know what, we'll take those things off the table.
Today we had Governor Norquist coming to town in support of a constitutional convention. Governor Norquist, someone that believes that government should be shrunk to a size big enough so he can drown it in the bathtub. So
elegantly put by the liberal.
That is a very, very, very scary proposition for someone that cares about poor people, that cares about the rights of workers, that cares about the rights of the less powerful.
Well, here's the thing. You know what? We'll take a break. We'll come back. So we have an expanded. We'll go down a checklist of a couple of things that will be primary in a constitutional convention, most likely, and hash it out. Stay with us.
We need to restore confidence in government. The legislature's been reluctant to deal with a reform agenda, and now the only way that a reform agenda can be dealt with is to let the people do it directly. And the only option in this state for the people to exercise direct democracy is through a constitutional convention.
That's Gary Sass, Bryant, and of course, former Director of Revenue, head of RIPEC, a guy who I'm sure you respect in terms of how and Phil West as well.
Of course, we've had many conversations.
All right, so look, you're worried about a small voter turnout, lots of numbers of people in each district running, which means that the most financed will eke out. First of all, I don't think everybody understands how this thing works. You will say yes or no. If you say no, it's all over on November 4th. If you say yes, then the General Assembly will set up the rules for a constitutional convention.
A special election.
A special election, which will pick a representative from each of the 75 districts that we live in. So there'll be 75 voting members to the Constitutional Convention who will set their own rules for what issues will come up and the like. And when they finally decide what questions they think the people ought to have posed to them, those will end up in the next statewide election. And so you're not comfortable with the idea that no matter what pragmatism or lunacy comes out of that deliberation, that the people in the next voting cycle will have a ratification process.
Absolutely, just like it happened in 1986.
So
In 1986, the convention was completely dominated by the legislature. The possibilities of that happening again, the proponents are afraid of the legislature. Well, a constitutional convention in this environment where the 60% of the legislators are running unopposed is just ripe for even more intervention by the General Assembly, if that's what you're afraid of.
What are they going to come up with? They're not going to touch abortion rights. They're not going to touch gay marriage.
I don't think that's...
Governor Norquist is not going to be able to intervene and literally drain the state budget. But
There's no limit.
Let me ask you, do you agree that we ought to have a line item veto for the governor?
I don't think that we should have a line item veto.
Okay. Do you agree that we ought to have initiative petition powers at least more prevalent than we do right now for the people like they do in Massachusetts?
I don't believe in voter initiative either.
Okay. So,
I believe in elections, and we should elect legislators that are going to do the work of the people. And when you have 60% of our legislators running unopposed, it's the electorate the ones that's not doing it.
When do you think, despite your disagreement with the concept of a line item veto, when do you think the inertia for something like that, which a lot of reformers think should happen, when do you think that's ever going to give birth out of the legislature itself? Answer, never, right?
No, just like the most important reforms in the state, the Judicial Nominating Commission, the term limits, and the separation of powers didn't come out of a constitutional convention. It came out of the legislature as a result of pressure by the electorate. The electorate needs to pressure the legislators and elect people that are going to serve their interests. A constitutional convention is a bypass feature that does not do that, and it actually increases the risk for your civil rights.
Well, listen, there are times when I look at the camera, the microphone, and just everyday people and ask them where the hell their brains are at when it comes to public and civic issues. And so I get that you have a little bit of a neuroses over whether the people will make smart decisions here. But at the end of the day, when you've got an election backup to the ideas that come through here, that's when most of the discourse will happen in its full fervor. And it seems to me that you're worried about the acumen of the electorate is superseding the chance for a new model to shake up what needs to be shaken up.
I worry about the evidence that I have of a previous convention of 25 amendments condensed into 14 because they don't want to take too much space in the ballot. I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's that kind of manipulation where people are not going to read an entire ballot and therefore they're going to check yes or no just based on, you know, it's only 14, it's only 15. When there were 25, they smushed them together to fit a piece of paper. That's not the way to make a democracy.
However, a constitutional convention could actually debate whether or not to actually do that. I mean, the rules are actually pretty much wide open in terms of what ends up on the ballot, yes?
Yes, and those were the rules that they established last time.
Yeah, well,
it's wishing for the best.
But well, you know what? Every once in a while, God forbid me for being optimistic, every once in a while you got to wish for the best, that the goodwill of reformers, no matter what reform is in their mind, will bear out the day.
As long as the risks do not outweigh, the benefit.
All right, well, here's the thing. You tweeted out that you convinced me today. You haven't, but you make good arguments. So come back and we'll have a longer show with you and the other guys. I'll sit back and watch and score it at home. How's that?
Will do.
Good to see you, man. Thank you for
coming. Good to have you.
All right, your state of mind when we come back. Your state of mind matters. You phone us at 228-1886, or you email us at stateofmind@myritv.com, or you tweet or Facebook post. Don't forget the E, or it won't come through. Here's a couple of Facebook posts I thought were kind of interesting that Jess put together for me here this evening. The only thing missing is the monorail, said Mike. For what? For this. Remember the couple of days ago, the press conference Buddy Cianci said, or had, where, this is the whole waterfront. Yeah. Well, there's no monorail, but there's a Ferris wheel. And then this, my grandson goes to that school in Warwick. He was kept home today, but I couldn't find a cop. Hey, Shelby, just because you couldn't find a cop doesn't mean there wasn't a cop. You know what I mean? Unless you're Inspector Clouseau or something like that. We'll see you tomorrow on the radio at noon on WPRO and back here with the Republican Executive Director tomorrow night.